Howdy folks, and welcome back to World of Warships with Rear Admiral Jingles, and another season of ranked sprint is upon us. Unsurprisingly, the Russian Tier 7 battleship, the Sinop, is proving extremely popular. Surprisingly, there's only one of them in this battle, and it's being captained for us by the star of today's video, Ruin1991. Ruin hails from Norway, so I have absolutely no idea how I'm supposed to pronounce his name. Is it Ruin or Ruin? You know what, we're just going to pretend he's Australian for the purposes of today's video and just call him Roo. Alrighty, Roo. I know I keep promising to never do that again. But if you haven't all figured out that I'm a thoroughly untrustworthy, inveterate liar by now, there's absolutely no hope for you. Anyway, what is it about the Sinop that makes it such a good pick for a Tier 7 ranked sprint? Well, if only there was just one thing. Let us count the number of ways in which the Sinop is amazing. 65,000 health, and that is a lot for a Tier 7. She's pretty quick. Stick a speed flag on her and she'll top out at 28.35 knots. The rudder shift is also pretty good by battleship standards, although you're not going to be swinging this thing around like a light cruiser. It is remarkably nimble. The guns, of which she has 9, are 16 inches in calibre, so she joins the Nelson and the Nagato in the 16-inch gun Tier 7 battleship club. The accuracy is pretty bad at long range, but surprisingly good at close range. And the turret arrangement is very good as well, with excellent firing angles, which allows you to bring all 9 of those 16-inch guns to bear on whoever is unfortunate enough for you to be aiming at, without exposing the broadside of the ship to too much danger by way of return fire. And when you do get shot at, providing you're not giving flat broadside, the armour is extraordinarily good. The concealment is surprisingly good as well, with a base surface detection range of just a hair over 15 kilometres, and while she is Tier 7 and therefore doesn't have access to the concealment mod equipment module, you can put a captain on her with the concealment expert skill, which Roo here has done, which brings the concealment down to an extremely manageable range for a battleship of 13.8 kilometres. The kind of ranges where if you've played the Sinop right, you can get close enough to an enemy without being detected, where you don't have to go that much further before the guns start to actually become remarkably accurate. And we're really talking about ranges of 12 kilometres or less here. You certainly shouldn't expect to be paddling the broadsides of targets at ranges like that. But, well, even a broken clock tells the right time twice a day, so when it does happen, and you really shouldn't expect it to happen often, but when it does, just think of it as a nice little participation bonus. It's a fairly good start, not just for Roo, but also for his team. The Akatsuki and the Sims have managed to successfully capture Alpha, while the enemy team are in the process of capturing Bravo. And it looks like they're going to do it without too much in the way of resistance, but the early cap of Alpha has at least put Roo's team ahead on points. He is of course detected, and there is a Scharnhorst over there, as well as an enemy destroyer. And he is giving broadside to the Scharnhorst here, but this is an extremely well-armoured battleship, and the Scharnhorst has kind of low-caliber guns by battleship standards, even if it does have a significantly faster reload. Second salvo at the Nelson perfectly straddled the target, but with no actual hits. At that kind of range, that's more of what you should expect by way of performance from the Sinop's guns. The Nelson returning fire, and as you'd expect, it's high explosive, and the Nelson also manages to straddle the target without scoring any hits. Now it's at this point that Roo decides he's going to divert to the left and head down in the general direction of Bravo and see what he can do about that Scharnhorst. Pops a couple of shots out against the Nelson, and this does of course mean he's going to have to turn broadside onto the Nelson's 16-inch guns, and if the Nelson was firing armour piercing, that would be a significant risk. But it's a calculated risk, and of course the Nelson is firing high explosive still, so the risk pays off. Yes, he takes some damage, but he's got plenty of health, and one fire is completely manageable. Remember, Russian battleships have a limited number of charges, unlike everybody else, on their damage control party, but they do get a vastly reduced cooldown. You can let it burn without too many problems, You never really want to be extinguishing a single fire anyway, particularly if you're expecting to take more high explosive shots, which is almost certainly going to be true of that Algerie and the Abruzzi that's just appeared, and not to mention the risk of torpedoes, not just from the Algerie and the Abruzzi, but also whichever destroyer is in that direction and was responsible for the smoke screen that we saw over there earlier. Because you're going to look pretty silly if you use your damage control to extinguish a single fire and then you take a bunch of torpedo hits resulting in flooding, and multiple further fires are set by all of the cruisers shooting at you. And potentially, if he gets any closer, well, if he gets a lot closer, the secondaries of the Scharnhorst over there as well. And I think his initial intention was to sail directly towards Bravo, but, well, he would almost certainly be sailing into an absolute wall of torpedoes. Not to mention, well, that would seem to be a fairly clear indication of the direction in which we can expect to find the enemy destroyer, but that still leaves the Algerie and potentially also some torpedoes that may have been launched from the Abruzzi. Now, I realise it can be difficult to remember the effective ranges of the torpedoes on every ship that you're going to face, but a general rule of thumb, and those, judging by the speed, were the torpedoes launched by the Abruzzi. But a nice general rule of thumb, when you're looking at a French cruiser, is 9 kilometres, particularly if they're not actually firing their guns at you for extended periods of time, like the Algerie over there, who's only just firing his guns now. 8-inch guns at that kind of range, quite effective against the broadsides of battleships, but he almost certainly turned to get broadside like that and slowed down to get his torpedoes away. And unlike the Abruzzi, they're actually reasonably quick, so we should expect to see them relatively soon. And yep, there they are. The Sinop doesn't get hydro, but you don't need hydro to know when somebody's launched torpedoes at you. Just look at what they're doing and ask yourself the question, why would they be behaving like that? Why would a cruiser stop firing his guns and give broadside to a battleship like that? Does the cruiser have torpedoes? Yes, then expect there to be torpedoes. Just make sure you take advantage of the situation to give him the paddling he so richly deserves. And yes, that was the first blood award. It's taken this long for anybody to die. And I believe we can say with a certain degree of confidence that we've just had a fix on the updated position of the enemy Shiratsuyu. But he has 2 torpedo launchers. There may be more to... Oh wait, he's been spotted by the Sims. Okay, well he's almost certainly focusing on the Sims now. And speaking of people whose attention is elsewhere, the Scharnhorst is firmly tunnel visioning on the Duke of York, so despite the fact that he's once again been lit up by the Abruzzi, it would be incredibly rude of him to not shoot at a Scharnhorst at that kind of range, presenting that kind of target. There's kill number 2. So, Rue is potentially in a bit of a torpedo sandwich here, although if the Shiratsuyu had torpedoes to launch at him, you'd almost certainly see them by now, but the Abruzzi, who just set him on fire before diverting behind an island to the rear, has... Yep, there they are. Now, the Abruzzi's torpedoes are notoriously slow with a speed of 51 knots, but it's still faster than a Sinop. He no longer has to worry about any torpedoes from the Shiratsuyu, and because he was turning to face the Shiratsuyu in the first place, he was able to avoid the torpedoes fired by the Abruzzi, who has just pulled a U-turn and should have been deleted from the surface of the ocean by the friendly Algerie, catching a light cruiser broadside at a range like that, but the Algerie was of course firing high explosive. So the Abruzzi, despite being caught by surprise by a heavy cruiser at point-blank range, has survived and has almost certainly gotten another set of torpedoes away, although right now they're probably of more danger to the Algerie. Actually no, even the Algerie isn't going to be threatened by those torpedoes. He's managed to get the island in the way. The Abruzzi, of course, has just gotten himself spotted by the Duke of York, who was engaged in a nose-to-nose gunfight with the Scharnhorst that Rue sank earlier. And a quick look at the map shows us that the Abruzzi only has 2 surviving teammates, and they're on the other side of the map, so that Abruzzi is going to want to disengage and get the hell out of here as fast as he possibly can. And usually, in an Italian cruiser, that's pretty damn fast. The Abruzzi has a top speed of 35 knots, which is faster than some destroyers. The Italians did like to build fast ships. And that's why what happens next took me completely by surprise. You see, I would have expected the Abruzzi to use his superior speed to duck around the island to the south and use it to escape potentially completely undetected. Instead, he cuts around inside the island, putting him in front of the guns of anything up to 4 enemy ships, and the Algérie has reloaded armor piercing because by this time he's figured out he's not hunting an enemy Yamato down here. Why would the Abruzzi do this? Because he could have gotten away. I think because at the time that he committed to coming out in front of that island, he was thinking, well, we're down 3 kills to 1. We're going to lose this. I'm at least going to take the Algérie with me. But in the meantime, his teammates have managed to almost even the scores. In fact, they did even the scores, until the Abruzzi died, leaving it 3 against 2, with Rue's team still 1 kill ahead. And there's not that much difference in the scores, so it was still entirely winnable for the enemy team at that point, and in fact still is. It's only 3 against 2. Of course, if the Abruzzi had elected to disengage rather than suicide, the enemy team would have still been 1 ship down, because the Abruzzi wouldn't have had the opportunity to kill the Algérie. But the Algérie was on such low health that he would have been blown out of the water by the next ship to take a shot at him anyway, so there was still very much everything to play for. And I've seen teams, and I've shown you teams in far worse situations than that, manage to snatch a victory from the jaws of defeat. So I guess what I'm saying is, you haven't lost until you've actually lost. There's the enemy Mars. I think there may be more torpedoes on the way. Rue's got a double fire going from the Nelson. But while his damage control is available, he's almost certainly sitting on it until he finds out whether or not he's going to chew on any of those. There they are, German torpedoes. And nope. The Mars has 2 launchers, 4 torpedoes in each. And while his torpedoes do have a fairly quick reload, 90 seconds, that's not nearly going to be quick enough. And oh dear. Well, on the plus side, that was the right decision from the Mars. Used the smokescreen to try to disengage. Unfortunately, the smokescreen didn't quite cover his escape window to the degree that he'd hoped it was going to. And so that's the high caliber. And the Kraken unleashed for Rue. And that just leaves, ironically, the first ship in the game to take damage, the Nelson that he citadeled in his opening salvo right back at the beginning of the game. Kraken unleashed, 5 kills in a ranked sprint battle when there are only 6 enemy ships available to be killed in the first place. And he's got the broadside of the Nelson to shoot at again. Just over 11 kilometers. Yeah, the range isn't bad, but it's just not quite good enough. And he's just used his damage control for the first time in this game. The Nelson managed to set a double fire. And potentially 30-second reload, although with adrenaline rush. But yeah, he's managed to get a second salvo off. Here it comes. Luckily, no fire. Although there's only 20 seconds remaining on the cooldown of the damage control anyway, so even if it had managed to set multiple fires, he would have been able to take care of it. Remember, Russian battleships reduce cooldown on the damage control, but it has a limited number of charges. And at this point, Rue is entirely conscious of the possibility that he might be the one to sink every ship on the enemy team here. And he's asking his teammates if he can have the final kill. Now, there's no harm in asking, but remember your teammates are under no obligation whatsoever to just let you have it. However, his surviving teammate, Zos Gunner in the Sims, tells him, I'll go and spot your target, and then does pretty much exactly that. Sprays a couple of rounds of 127mm high explosive in the general direction of the Nelson, possibly hoping to set a fire. Realises, oh, hang on a second, I might actually kill this guy. And then at great personal risk to himself, stops firing in front of a Nelson, which up until this point has been firing nothing but 16-inch high explosive. And as luck would have it, has finally loaded the armor piercing, only to find that the only viable target available to him was a destroyer. And he's now shot his bolt, didn't kill the Sims, which allows Rue to claim the 6th and final kill in that Tier 7 ranked sprint battle. Rune tells me that when he was playing this game, he was quite literally on the edge of his seat with excitement and anticipation, which was not a popular move with his cat, who likes to sit in his lap while he's working on the computer, and was forced to relocate to the top of the PC. Doesn't look too happy about it. Ruin, I can relate. Anyway, that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed it, and as always, take care, and I'll catch you next time.